Welcome to The Deep Dive. This is where we take a whole stack of sources, articles, research, our own notes, and we really dig in, trying to pull out the most important insights, all to help you feel genuinely well-informed.
And today we're asking you to step back in time with us, but not to some huge chaotic battle or, a world-changing disaster.
No, we're going to a year that seems, well, almost quiet on the surface, kind of ordinary even, 8 BC.
Exactly. It's a year that you might just skim past on a timeline. But as authors of In the Fullness of Time, our book that looks year by year at how God was preparing the world, we found that these quiet shifts, they can reveal some really profound things.
Right.
So today, acting as special guest host here on Our True Identity, we want to unpack 3 events from 8 BC. They seem subtle, but they're significant. We'll look at the quiet death of a really famous poet, the almost casual renaming of a month on the calendar, and some military campaigns happening way out on the edges of the Roman Empire, also very quiet.
And our mission, really, is to explore how these seemingly small changes might show us how the world was, maybe unknowingly, being prepared for something huge.
Yeah.
A moment of deep spiritual significance.
Yeah, this isn't just dusty old history. We see it as a window, really, into the human soul. And from our perspective, into God's providence, getting the world ready for Christ.
And we also want to use this look back as a way to think about our own lives, right? The structures we build, the identities we try to create.
Absolutely. We'll explore how this feeling of fullness back then, this sense that Rome had altogether successful, organized, how that can actually mask a much deeper longing. A longing that, honestly, probably resonates with many of us today in our own search for meaning and identity.
Okay, so let's dive into 8 BC. Where should we start?
Let's start with a death. A quiet one, but one that really mattered. In the last few months of 8 BC, Rome lost a key voice. Quintus Horatius Flaccus. We know him as Horace.
Horace, the poet.
The poet. The one who, you could argue, really gave Augustan Rome its defining voice. His death wasn't dramatic, apparently, more like a gentle fading, but the silence he left, well, it echoed.
His pen had done so much right. Satire, hymns, poems about everyday life, poems celebrating Augustus.
Everything. He wrote about the triumphs of generals, sure, but also the simple joys of his vineyard, and suddenly he was gone. Just a name. His legacy, though, that lived on, he was the melodic herald, you might say, of Augustus's Rome.
But what's so interesting about Horace, as you point out, is his background. He wasn't exactly born with a silver spoon, was he?
Not at all. That's what makes his perspective so unique later on. That blend of wit, sharp observation, but also a kind of wisdom born from hardship. He was born down in Venusia, southern Italy. His father was a freedman.
A former slave?
Yeah, managed to gain his freedom, even got a small property, which back then, for a freedman's son to get the education Horace did, highly unlikely. But his father really invested in him, sent him to Rome, then later to Athens for philosophy.
Athens, the intellectual center.
Right. And it was there, amidst all the philosophical debate, that he gets swept up in the chaos after Julius Caesar is killed, the civil wars.
And he picks a side.
He does. He actually joins Brutus's forces,
Right.
the Republicans, which, turns out to be the wrong side, historically speaking.
Yeah.
He was fighting against Octavian, the future Augustus.
Wow. So he experienced defeat firsthand.
Oh, yeah. At the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC, big loss for the Republicans. And that experience, that taste of defeat and the chaos of war, it seems to have really shaped him, gave him a deep appreciation for peace, for stability later on.
Okay, so let's trace that arc. Born outside the elite, fought for the losing side in a civil war. How on earth does that guy become the voice of the new imperial establishment under Augustus? That's quite a journey.
It really is. And it wasn't just luck. After that defeat, his life takes a turn, largely thanks to patronage. Specifically, one man.
Maecenas. Augustus's right-hand man for culture, essentially.
That's a good way to put it. He was Augustus's key advisor on cultural affairs, tasked with shaping the image, the narrative of this new era. Maecenas was a huge literary patron himself, very influential, and he saw something in Horace.
What did he see?
He saw the talent, obviously, the wit, the lyrical skill, but more than that, I think he saw a voice that could genuinely connect with people, soothe a nation just exhausted by decades of civil war. He saw someone who could help elevate Augustus, give his rule a sense of permanence, of destiny, by articulating the ideals of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace.
So bring him into the fold.
Exactly, and this is crucial. Maecenas didn't just hire him as, like, a state propagandist churning out slogans. He gave Horace support, resources, including that famous Sabine farm, but also a significant degree of creative freedom.
Ah, so he wasn't just a mouthpiece.
No. And that freedom is probably why his work had such integrity, such weight. Even when he was praising Augustus, it felt more authentic because it wasn't seen as purely dictated from above. He had space to be himself, to observe, even to subtly critique sometimes.
That makes sense. That freedom must be why his words became so powerful then. Not just political spin, but as you said, like a lens through which Rome saw itself. How did his poetry actually do that? How did it reflect and shape Roman identity?
Well, he became more than just a writer. He was, in a way, Rome's mirror, but also maybe its conscience. Think about his odes. They're beautiful, full of classical references, but they also sing about things like moderation, duty, the simple blessings of peace, themes that would have resonated incredibly deeply with people who'd lived through the horrors of the civil wars.
So celebrating peace, but also reminding them.
Reminding them of life's fragility, the importance of inner contentment, not just external power. Then you have satires. They poke fun at human weaknesses, vanity, greed, but the accounts always stress, without malice. He wasn't trying to tear people down, more like holding up a mirror gently, prompting a bit of self-reflection.
And the epistles.
Those are more philosophical. Practical wisdom, advice on living well, on seeking knowledge, stuff that could sit comfortably alongside what senators or philosophers were saying. So across all these different styles, he found this amazing way to praise Augustus's achievement, the peace he brought, without sounding like a total sycophant. He walked this incredibly fine line between celebrating the regime and speaking truth.
That's a tricky line to walk. How did he make the praise feel authentic, not just like, well, propaganda? You called it almost national scripture.
Yeah, I think he did it by framing Augustus's rule not just in terms of military victory or new buildings, but through meter and mood,
Yeah.
as one scholar put it. He imbued the era with a sense of destiny, almost divine favor, a natural order restored.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The perfect example was the Carmen Saeculare, the hymn for the secular games. This was a huge deal. In 17 BC, Augustus holds these massive games, partly celebrating his return from campaigns, but more profoundly, marking the start of a new saeculum, a new golden age.
A once-in-a-lifetime event, basically.
Pretty much. And who does Augustus commission to write the official hymn, to be sung by choirs of 27 boys and 27 girls at the climax of the festival? Horace.
Wow.
And that hymn perfectly captured the moment. It spoke of civil strife ended, divine favor returning, a new era of peace and prosperity under Augustus. It gave the Roman people this beautiful, coherent story for what they were living through. It wasn't just Augustus saying things are great. It was Horace's poetry making them feel the rightness, the blessing of this new age. That's incredibly powerful, soft power at its finest.
Yet, for all this public prominence, being Rome's official bard in a way, his personal life seems quite different, almost humble.
It's a fascinating contrast, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it tells you a lot about him. Privately, he seems to have remained very grounded. He turned down opportunities for greater political influence or status. He cherished his independence.
Never married.
Never married. Lived relatively simply out on that Sabine farm Maecenas gave him. His writing often reflects this, musing on aging, friendship, the enjoyment of simple pleasures like wine, and sometimes, reflecting on the absurdity of human striving, even amidst Rome's triumphs.
So he was Rome's poet, but also, as you said, its conscience.
I think so. He subtly reminded this culture obsessed with power and expansion, about the limits of that power, about the value of inner peace, contentment. Things easily forgotten when you're running an empire. His own simple life gave his words an integrity they wouldn't have had otherwise.
And by 8 BC, he's this revered figure. He's seen Rome transform. What was the impact when he actually died?
His death wasn't just the loss of a poet. It kind of cemented his legacy, enshrined him. The immediate silence wasn't maybe in the Senate halls, but more in the everyday life of Rome. The verses people recited at dinner, the scrolls students studied, his voice had helped them make sense of the chaos, then celebrate the peace.
Even Augustus felt the loss.
Apparently so. Augustus himself grieved. Because Horace wasn't just a flatterer. He was someone who had genuinely helped Rome believe its own story. Not through lies, but through the sheer beauty and the sense of order in his poetry. He made the Pax Romana feel like something more than just military dominance, maybe something providentially ordained.
It's powerful, that idea, Rome believing its own story through beauty and order. But you also mentioned a kind of prophetic undertone, that even his praise highlighted a deeper void.
Exactly. That's the subtle irony when we look back. Even as he's writing poems that, metaphorically place Augustus among the gods, celebrating his unprecedented peace, his work somehow also underscores how deeply hungry the world still was. Hungry for a peace that truly lasted, for a connection, a savior that was beyond human capacity.
He wouldn't live to see the one Christians believe was that savior.
No. He died just a few years before the birth of Christ. But his death, like his life, fits into this larger pattern we trace in the book, this pattern of preparation. By celebrating the best that Rome could offer, its peace, its order, its structures, Horace inadvertently revealed the limits of those human solutions. His passing closed a chapter in literature, sure, but maybe also in Rome's soul. The lyricist was gone. And into that silence, eventually, a very different kind of song would arise. Not in Latin, but in Aramaic. Not for emperors, but for everyone.
So his journey from rebel to bard, it shows how even the most beautiful human stories, the best structures we build, can point to the very emptiness they try to fill. Rome found its voice in him, but his quiet life maybe hinted at a longing that went beyond empire. What does that say to us now? This idea of crafting our own narratives, achieving things, hoping it satisfies, but finding that ache is still there.
It's a really resonant question, I think, because we do that, don't we? We work so hard to build these impressive narratives for our own lives, our careers, our families, our reputations. We strive for success, order, control, hoping that's the thing that will finally bring deep satisfaction.
We'll create our own little golden ages.
Exactly. The perfect resume, the successful business, the well-behaved kids, the spotless image. But underneath all that polish, sometimes there's still that quiet ache, that whisper, maybe late at night, that asks, okay, but is this really it?
Just like Rome, maybe?
Yeah.
All the power, all the poetry, but still reaching for something more.
Yeah. It suggests that even our best human efforts, however noble or beautiful, just can't quite satisfy that deepest hunger of the soul, the hunger for true meaning, lasting peace, something transcendent.
And as Horace's voice falls silent, the emperor, Augustus, he certainly wasn't fading. In fact, in the same year, 8 BC, he makes a move to embed his legacy in something even more fundamental than poetry.
Time itself.
The calendar. This feels like a major step in consolidating power. Poems can be forgotten, misinterpreted maybe, statues crumble, but the calendar, people live by that.
It's an incredible assertion of power, isn't it? When people count their days using your name, your legacy isn't just history anymore. It's woven into the very rhythm of daily life.
So what exactly happened in 8 BC?
Sextilis. That was the name of the 8th month in the Roman calendar for centuries. It literally just meant 6th month in the older calendar before Julius Caesar reformed it. Well, in 8 BC, Sextilis ceased to exist. It was renamed Augustus, after the emperor. Not just a tribute, like naming a building. This was claiming a piece of time itself, an act of ownership, almost dominion.
Had this happened before? I mean, besides July for Julius Caesar.
July was the big precedent, yeah. Julius Caesar renamed Quintilis the 5th month to July after himself back in 44 BC. But Augustus, he was always more patient, more strategic than Caesar. He waited.
Waited for what?
He waited decades. He waited until he had truly solidified his power, brought order after the civil wars, built the foundations of the empire. He waited until the big victories were won, Egypt conquered, the Temple of Janus symbolically closed to signify peace, the provinces organized, the civil wars definitively over. He'd rebuilt Rome, been named father of the country. People were even calling him son of a god. Only then, when his position was utterly secure, did he make this move on the calendar.
And the Senate, the supposed guardians of the Republic's memory, they just rolled over. This seems like a huge step towards monarchy.
Well, from their perspective, why rock the boat? Augustus had given them peace. He'd given them stability, prosperity. The empire was, by all accounts, running incredibly smoothly. Grain was flowing, taxes were being collected, the legions were strong on the frontiers. Rome itself was being transformed with new temples, aqueducts, public buildings. He'd given them the illusion of shared power, even if the reality was different.
So they were comfortable.
They were comfortable. The Senate, by this point, was largely ceremonial anyway. They owed their positions, their security, to Augustus. Resisting him over the name of a month. Unthinkable. They likely presented it as their idea, an honor for the emperor. It just happened.
So Sextilis becomes August, just like that.
Just like that. It became a monument more pervasive than any statue. Every official document, every business contract, every notation of a birth or death, every religious festival date from that point on, it would happen in August. His name was now part of the fundamental structure of reality for everyone in the empire.
Did ordinary people even register the significance? Or was it just, oh, they changed the name of the month, like a bureaucratic footnote?
That's the fascinating part. They seem to have accepted it very quickly, maybe too quickly, which tells you something about how accustomed they'd become to Augustus just changing things.
They'd already seen bigger changes.
Much bigger. They'd seen the Republic effectively become an empire ruled by one man, even if he used titles like first citizen. They'd seen the Senate lose its real power. They'd seen the city physically transformed. Compared to all that, renaming a month probably felt minor, almost normal.
It wasn't minor at all.
Not in symbolism. It normalized his absolute authority in a very subtle, pervasive way. Augustus wasn't just the leader anymore. He was becoming the framework through which time itself was measured.
So the scribes update their records, the priests adjust the festival dates. But for most people, it just slips into language. My birthday's in August. We'll harvest in August. It embeds his power in the mundane.
Exactly. It didn't require force. It just required the passage of time, the repetition of the new name, until it felt like it had always been that way. And underneath that quiet acceptance, something really profound was happening. For Augustus, this was more than just honor. It was about control. It showed that history itself could be rewritten, that even the numbers on a calendar could serve his name.
And what did this quiet change reveal about the wider world, the sort of spirit of the age?
I think it points to a world that was, well, tired. Tired of chaos. Tired of conflict. Willing to trade a certain amount of freedom or historical continuity for order, for peace, for predictability. As long as someone capable was in charge, people were willing to let them define the terms.
And this is where you connect it to that idea of saturation.
Yes. This is what we mean when we say the world was full, not full of chaos, but saturated. Saturated with human systems, human assumptions about power, human names, human narratives. It was a world where a man could achieve almost godlike status, not through divine acts, but through sheer administrative efficiency, military success, and yes, by literally writing his name onto the calendar.
A world that knew how to conquer, how to count, how to build.
But maybe had forgotten how to truly rest, how to hope for something beyond the next imperial decree or the next successful harvest. It was full of human solutions.
So the month of August becomes this symbol. Triumph, yes, but also maybe a deeper longing, a desire to make things permanent, to hold back time, to keep death away through sheer force of will and organization.
Absolutely. It's like Augustus was trying to freeze the golden age in place, make it last forever by branding it with his name. But, of course, you can't really do that. Marble cracks, empires fall, calendars even get reformed again later. He declared time was his, but time always has other plans. It shows the peak of human control, but also hints at the limits of that control.
Okay, so the poet who voiced Rome's soul is gone. The calendar now bears the emperor's name. Everything seems locked down, ordered, permanent, but not quite everywhere.
No, far away from the marble halls of Rome, far beyond the reach of renamed months, there was still a place that resisted easy definition, easy control, Germania.
Across the Rhine and Danube rivers.
Exactly. That vast, shadowy, forested land, not yet fully ruled, definitely not renamed. And it was stirring. It was here in 8 BC that Augustus sent a man not for parades or celebrations, but for containment. His stepson, Tiberius.
Tiberius. He wasn't exactly thrilled about this assignment, was he?
No, Tiberius was a very different character from, say, the ambitious generals of the past. He was reserved, dutiful, pragmatic, maybe even a bit grim. His brother, Drusus, had been the one leading the charge into Germania with grand visions.
But Drusus died just the year before, right? 9 BC?
Yes, tragically. Fell from his horse, or perhaps illness took him. It hit Tiberius hard. He was loyal to his brother. So in 8 BC, Tiberius is the one who has to pick up that standard, cross back into Germania, and try to secure what Drusus had started. But you get the sense he did it out of duty, not ambition. He didn't seem to have much faith in glorious, lasting conquest there. His goal was more practical. Secure the frontier.
A reluctant commander, then. How did he approach this task in Germania?
Methodically. Precisely. Silently, almost. He wasn't charismatic like some generals, but he commanded respect through sheer competence and discipline. His legions obeyed him without question. He focused on consolidating Roman presence in the border areas, places like Raetia and Noricum mountainous regions south of the main Germanic tribes.
What did that involve? Building forts.
Building forts, yes. Subduing resistant local tribes. Establishing supply lines, laying down, as historians say, the bones of Roman order in a land that wasn't used to it. His legions pushed through forests, crossed rivers, set up camps. It was slow, difficult work. He wasn't chasing glory. He was trying to prevent future problems for Rome. That was his focus.
It really speaks to Rome's desire, maybe obsession, with control, but also surely the illusion of control in a place like Germania. The land itself, the people, they wouldn't have been easy to manage.
Not at all. The Germanic tribes, Romans lumped them together, but they were distinct groups, like the Cherushi, the Chatti, the Marcomanni. They were fiercely independent. Their loyalties shifted. Alliances were temporary, based on immediate benefit. Roman ideas of treaties and permanent borders didn't mean much to them. Their whole way of life, their warrior culture, their deep connection to the forests, it was fundamentally resistant to Roman-style order.
And Augustus wanted more than just a defensive line. He wanted to push into Germania.
That was the strategic goal, yes.
Right.
To push the border forward, maybe to the Elbe River, to create a more defensible buffer zone. Augustus couldn't tolerate this large, unconquered, unpredictable territory looming on the frontier. It had to be managed, controlled, eventually Romanized. That was a long-term vision from Rome.
So Tiberius is tasked with implementing this vision on the ground, marching, building, securing.
Exactly. Garrison by garrison. He built forts where people definitely didn't want them. He buried Roman coins in the ground, a subtle symbol of occupation. He raised the legionary standards, the eagles, in these misty, unfamiliar forests. But Tiberius, being the pragmatist he was, likely knew this wasn't true conquest in the old sense.
It was what? Management.
Management. Maintenance. Maybe just delaying the inevitable conflict. You get the sense he understood the limits of Roman power in that environment far better than Augustus did back in Rome. The forests themselves seemed to resist. The tribes might submit temporarily, but their resentment simmered.
And weren't there already signs of future trouble? Figures emerging from these tribes?
Yes. Even then, history was quietly setting the stage. Somewhere in those forests, a young Cheruscan prince was growing up. He'd likely seen Tiberius's legions. He might have even spent time among the Romans, perhaps as a hostage or for training in the auxiliary forces. His name was Arminius.
Arminius. The one who would later...
The one who would later inflict one of Rome's most devastating defeats at the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. Rome thought it was observing him, maybe even Romanizing him. But the forest, as the saying goes, knew better. He was learning Rome's ways, yes, but his loyalty remained with his people.
So, even in 8 BC, under Tiberius's disciplined control, there's this constant underlying tension. The silent war, as you call it.
That's exactly it. Tiberius likely sent back reports that were factual, unemotional, progress made here, resistance encountered there, supplies needed. But the real story was the tension, the feeling in every Roman camp pitched in that damp, cold forest. How long could this last?
You could feel the resistance not just in ambushes, but in the landscape.
In the landscape, in the cold, in the way locals would just melt into the trees, in the silence that never felt truly peaceful. It was a constant grind, maintaining this frontier. It wasn't glorious expansion. It was more like leaning hard against a persistent hostile wind. The peace was holding, yes, but just barely.
And that struggle, that constant effort just to maintain control, to manage a situation that maybe couldn't truly be solved by Roman methods, that resonates, doesn't it?
It really does. It makes you think. Where in our own lives do we pour so much energy into just maintaining? Managing problems, keeping up appearances, holding everything together, often with sheer willpower, only to feel like the edges are still fraying, that there's this deeper weariness of resistance under the surface.
That feeling of just leaning into the wind.
Yeah. That constant effort to control things that maybe aren't ultimately controllable instead of finding a different kind of peace. Tiberius's work in Germania is a stark picture of that kind of exhausting maintenance.
Okay, let's pull these threads together now. We have the poet's voice silenced, leaving a kind of cultural, spiritual quiet. We have the emperor claiming time itself, renaming a month, trying to solidify his legacy into the very structure of reality. And we have the legions on the frontier, methodically managing, controlling, but facing a resistance that won't fully yield.
Put it all together, and Rome in 8 BC looks incredibly strong, incredibly ordered on the surface. The empire seems invincible, provinces are paying tribute, the calendar obeys the emperor, the defining poet has already sung the praises of the new age, the big threats seem contained or conquered.
Everything looks locked down, secure, permanent.
Outwardly, yes. It's humming along with a kind of disciplined efficiency. But if you listen closely, not to the official pronouncements, but maybe to the silences in between, you sense something else, a tension, a weariness.
The poet is gone, and the silence is telling. The calendar is claimed, but it feels like an attempt to grasp something ultimately ungraspable. The border is held, but it's a constant draining effort.
Exactly. The empire is moving forward, but maybe more out of disciplined habit than out of genuine joy or overflowing confidence. It feels like the world had learned how to function, how to manage, how to control, but maybe had forgotten how to truly rest. It had traded that deep, perhaps uncomfortable, longing for something more, for just maintenance, keeping the system going.
No big alarms, no major crises right at that moment.
No, just this slow thickening, this sense of saturation, a world filled to the brim with human solutions, human structures, human ambitions.
And this is what you, drawing on the Apostle Paul, call the pleroma the fullness of time. Not fullness in a good way necessarily, but fullness as in saturated, filled up.
Precisely. That's the key insight we explore in the fullness of time. The world was ready for Christ's arrival, not because it was in utter chaos, nor because it was particularly virtuous, nor even because Rome was so strong. It was ready because it was saturated. It had, in a sense, run out of room for its own solutions.
Human ingenuity had kind of reached its peak, or maybe its limit.
You could say that. The systems were all in place. Politics, law, military taxation, trade. Rome had sophisticated systems for everything. Alliances were managed. The calendar was set. The great voices had spoken. Philosophies had been debated for centuries. And yet, that ache was still there. Undefined, maybe, but persistent.
Beneath all the marble and order and efficiency, just exhaustion, a longing the empire couldn't satisfy.
A deep, pervasive sense of limitation, perhaps. A longing for meaning, for connection, for a peace that went deeper than just the absence of war, that the vast, powerful Roman Empire with all its achievements simply couldn't provide. Horace hinted at it. Augustus tried to paper over it with grandeur. Tiberius tried to wall it off with legions, but none of it truly worked.
That ache remained, and that's what made it the fullness of time.
That's how we interpret it. Jesus didn't come into a void. He came into a world that had tried everything else. It had built its empires, crowned its Caesars, written its philosophies, sung its hymns to human glory, and still found itself fundamentally wanting, still restless, still searching.
So the angel's arrival, the nativity story, it wasn't about fixing a world spiraling into chaos.
Not primarily. It was more about interrupting a world that had settled into a kind of functional, orderly, but ultimately unfulfilling rhythm. A world where everything seemed to be managed, counted, controlled, where soldiers guarded, bureaucrats counted. Poets had mostly stopped singing anything truly new. It was interrupting the routine of a world adjusted to systems that couldn't heal the deepest needs of the human heart.
And that ancient world, it sounds uncomfortably familiar sometimes.
Doesn't it? Because we do the same thing. We mistake structure for salvation. We build these incredibly organized lives around our calendars, our careers, our roles, our routines. We manage, we achieve, we keep things running.
We create our own Augusts in our lives, months named after our successes, our control.
Exactly. But deep down, many of us know something's still missing. Our personal empire might look successful, our borders might feel secure, but the soul still feels hungry, unsettled.
And this is where the message connects so directly to our true identity. Because the invitation of grace, the gospel invitation, it isn't just for when our lives totally fall apart.
No, often the most profound invitation comes when things look fine on the outside. It comes to the person who's just tired of pretending, tired of holding it all together and wondering why it still feels empty or numb.
The person who's done everything right, followed the rules, achieved the goals, and still hears that quiet whisper, is this all there is?
That's the moment. That's often the real fullness of time in our own lives. Not necessarily hitting rock bottom, but hitting the limits of our own strength, our own solutions, our own carefully constructed identities.
And your point is crucial. Fullness does not mean satisfaction. God often meets us not in the wreckage, but in those quiet places where everything seems okay, but our soul is still longing.
Right. And grace arrives quietly, too. It's not usually like Augustus renaming things with a grand public decree. It's often more like Horace's ideal, maybe tucked away, unassuming, stubborn in its simplicity.
It doesn't barge in.
No. It waits. It meets us in the silence we've been trying so hard to fill with busyness or noise. It meets us when we finally stop performing, stop striving, stop managing everything down to the last detail.
So maybe someone listening right now, their life looks like that August. Dignified on the outside, structured, looks permanent, reputation solid, responsibilities handled, everything managed.
But underneath, maybe there's that ache, that longing for something more than just getting through another day, more than just keeping up the performance, more than the weight of managing it all.
If that's you, the message here is you're not alone. You're not broken beyond repair. You might actually be in your fullness of time.
This is that moment. The moment when all the old ways, all the things you've tried to make yourself feel whole or satisfied have kind of run their course. When even your best efforts don't quite silence that ache anymore. And the good news is, God isn't waiting for you to fix yourself first. He's not offended by your fullness, by the life you've built. He meets you right in the middle of it. He invites your presence, not your perfection.
And this is why spaces like Celebrate Recovery are so important, isn't it? It's not just for people whose lives have visibly imploded.
Not at all. It's very much for the secret ones, too. The parent smiling through utter exhaustion. The student who did everything right but feels lost. The believer who loves God but feels stuck or restless deep down. It's for the high achiever, the caretaker, the leader, carrying so much weight. Anyone who suspects, even quietly, that the structures they rely on aren't enough, that something is still missing.
Because grace isn't just waiting at the end of your rope, it's been there all along, in the quiet moments, in the silent ache, in the rhythms of your managed life.
So just reflect on that enduring truth. Into a world obsessed with control, with managing appearances, with renaming things to fit our narrative, grace still arrives. Quietly, gently, maybe even in a way that feels almost offensively simple compared to our complex striving.
Take a moment maybe to consider what your own August, your own area of achievement and control might be masking. Is there a quiet ache underneath it all?
Remember, fullness does not equal satisfaction. Grace arrives quietly. And if this resonates, if you feel that longing, we want to invite you. Join us this Friday night, 7 p.m. at Peters Creek Baptist Church. It's part of our Summer Nights of Hope series at Celebrate Recovery.
What happens there?
We'll hear a story, someone's personal story of trying for years to measure up, to achieve, to control, to manage everything perfectly, and discovering that it was actually surrender, not more striving, that finally brought peace.
Do people need to sign up or prepare anything?
No, not at all. You don't have to sign up. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to explain yourself. Just show up. Come exactly as you are. You will be seen. You will be welcomed.
It's for anyone who feels that pull, that sense that maybe there's more than just managing life.
Yes, especially for those who quietly suspect something's missing, even when everything looks fine. The high achiever, the caretaker, the leader, the one holding it all together.
And this is your time.